Hey folks, your favorite bike is back in the shop. We'll go into that here in a little bit. But I'll show you what we're going to do in this particular video. It's not going to be terribly long because I only have a couple things to do, but subsequent ones are going to be a little bit more in depth. So let's go ahead and get right to it. Okay, if you guys are watching the channel at all and you saw the update video on the business side, then you understand why this is back. And I went and picked up it and all the stuff from customer storage unit today where it was. And we went over some other stuff too, which is some cool projects that I think we're going to get into in the future. I don't want to spill the beans too much, but let's just say that the Top Gun motorcycle from 1985 might have something to do with it. Maybe even two of them, but I digress. What we're going to do in this video on the Z1-R is the customer gave me the carburetors that came off of this bike. I thought these were they, but they're not. I made a mistake. That have been all done up. I'll show you those in a second. We're going to go ahead and get those installed, and I'm going to fire it up, and we're going to do a synchronization on it and get it running better than it was, hopefully, when we first started it up, I don't know, a couple months ago. Speaking of which, I did reach out to the engine builder and say, Mr. Builder, this hasn't been started in like a month and a half because of circumstances out of our control. And do you want me to do anything in regards to relubricating the cylinders or anything? He said no, unless it was stored in a moist environment. Well, he lives in Florida too. It's moist everywhere, but my shed's drier than a popcorn fart because of all the insulation. And customer area was dry too, so I don't expect that to be an issue. We're not going to do anything there. I told him we only ran it through one heat cycle, and heat and cool cycle. He wanted 3 before retorquing the heads, but he said no, go ahead and do it. You can't retorque them enough. Just keep retorquing them after it cools down until they don't take any more torque. And I would have done that anyway, because on the other side here, let me show you, we got us a wee bit of an oil leak around these crush washers. You know, because these are main oil passages, so you know, they double duty as passages for the studs. You said stud. And these crush washers, or I should say the oil passage, and these crush washers do that sealing action. And all of these took torque, and a couple of them I probably could have put on a socket with an extension and a little hand rotating ratchet deal and unscrewed them. Loosened them. They were so loose. So I'm sorry, but even an engine that has been freshly done top end wise shouldn't have head fasteners, you know, studs or what have you, that loose after one heat and cool cycle. So based upon everything else I found on this thing, which was loose, I don't think these were torqued properly either. I should have checked that when it first came back. I don't believe I did. I don't remember. But I don't see any leaks at the base gasket or where the head basket. Yeah, the head gasket meets the cylinder block, so the head rather, not the head gasket. I'm going for a brain transplant this week, so I think this will all be corrected then. Okay, not really, but we'll go. Since I already torqued it, we're going to go ahead and get the carbs on, and we'll see how it runs at that point. Oil's really good still, and I wouldn't expect it not to be. And the level is perfect. So yeah, let's get to it. Oh, I got to put the battery on charge, dummy. This thing hadn't been cranked in a while, so while I put the carbs on, we'll go ahead and charge the battery too. Of course, El Stupido behind the camera forgot to show you the carbs. Now, I did this. I did all this carb work. No, I didn't. I don't do this stuff. I forgot where he got it done, but whoever did it did a nice job. Totally rebuilt according to my customer, and all the, you know, the shenanigans on the surface and everything, cleaning them up, vapor blasting, whatever. And so what I did was, because, you know, I don't trust anyone except me sometimes, I flipped him over right here in the box. I put the feller in the box and I buried him outside the shed. What movie is that from? And I pressure tested each pair of carbs because we have one inlet for two carbs, each 2 carbs. And it definitely passes a pressure test. So I don't have a problem with it, or I don't have a suspicion it'll overflow with fuel put to it. As far as the float level and everything, well, we're going to have to assume that he did that right. And I have no idea what the jetting is. So it's probably the jets that were in there, and that engine is built up a little bit differently from the one that was in there. So I would say there's probably about a 365.2% chance that these will have to get rejetted at some point, but I don't know yet. So anyway, now we'll go ahead and put her on charge, and we'll get these carbs there in there. Okay, folks, fast forward a couple of days. Had a little hang up that I forgot about. Needed to change the oil pressure switch. I think you remember from the earlier videos, the first one is starting this thing up after getting back in the frame, you know, with the other carbs that were on it. It wasn't working, and so I forgot all about it. And I finally got one in that's installed. I had to make a proper connector. They had just put a straight bullet connector on it, or a press connector, so the cap wouldn't go on. I mean, you know, I'm really getting sick of fixing other people's crap. I really am, but you know, I guess it's part of the job. But anyway. We're going to go ahead and put the carbs in, and then we'll put some fuel to them and fire it up. On a side note, I just uploaded a video on the Magna doing the carburetors. There it is right there. And today was the first day I got to take it out, because it's been cold down here, folks. Look, I'm dainty, all right? And it runs fabulously. Oh my God, does it run good. If I had a decent camera to mount on there, like a good GoPro, if more of you people would subscribe and I can make more revenue in the channel, I could afford one. But, you know, until then, we're going to have to live without it. But let me tell you what, this thing just sings. Oh, it pulls so much better. So I'm really glad I did that work. So let's get back to this, speaking of work. So I'll set you up in a stand. We'll jam these carbs in, the original carbs that came off of it. I forgot what they are. You know, obviously McKinney's, but round slides, yada yada. Get them plugged in with the, of course, throttle cables hooked up, and like I said, we'll get some fuel to them and fire it up. I fully expect I'm going to need to do a sync on them, so because these were all tore apart to do the tomfoolery regarding the finishing, and I guess replacing all the fuel O-rings and so forth. So yeah, and I just love this yellow fuel line nut. We're going to get rid of that too. Yeah, we're going to put some good fuel line on there. Maybe not. I don't know yet. You know what? I don't like it, but maybe we'll just put a T on it for now and then see how it goes. I can always get in there and change that, since there ain't no air box or nothing to get in my way. Get in the way. Oh yeah, I have the proper pods for it too. So we'll stick the pods on. When I first started it up, I didn't have any pods on it, because I want to tune this thing with the pods on it as it would be if it was in normal running condition. All right, so let's get that done. Come on there, sucker. You know, it's good to have a push-pull, because like on that XS11, it does not have a push-pull. And as I suspect that the over-rev that he had in that was from a problem in the throttle cable, and when he turned the handlebar, it pulled it to almost wide open, or mostly wide open position. And that caused him to have the grief that he had on that motor. If it had a push-pull, it wouldn't have happened, because the two cables would be essentially nulling themselves out in that situation. So the push-pull is good, but they are a prick. Okay, so this is what I'm looking at. Get you up close. You got to get that doodad in there, the little slit in there, to get the ferrule in. Ferrule! And then the one down in there as well. So you stick that one down through and release the nut. Drop the nut down with it, because it won't fit with the nut on the barrel here. You get the ferrule and then the barrel. And then you put the nut in. Then you tighten them up. You're going to have to look over my shoulder and through my armpit. And these fit actually pretty good. So not too terribly much of a fight. Only some, like they all are. All right, I'm just going to tighten up the band clamps there, and on all four of them, of course. And then we'll get the pods on and get some fuel to it. Now, I've cranked this thing around already once, because when I was testing this, actually 2 or 3 times, because I was testing this stupid thing. All right, so I've got this set up. I got the fuel can hanging from the other OSHA-approved fuel can hanger gizmo. And went ahead and just put the carb tune right on it. Why not? Because I know they're going to have to be synced. These sync differently. I'll show you how they do later on. I'm going to pull the caps off of that, but I want to start it up first and see where it's at before I do that. I know I'm going to have to, but that can also alter a little bit of the performance. I just want to see how it runs right off the bat, because those things will, it's possible they can introduce a little bit of a vacuum leak. So, you know, because the slide is right underneath there, but not really a whole lot. I mean, that's my theory mainly, but anyway, so what I want to do now is, I don't have any fuel in the carbs yet, and I don't even have the coils plugged in. The coils are not plugged in. What I want to do is I want to see if we can crank it over and get the oil light to shut off. I want to test that first. So the coils are still unplugged, and I haven't turned any fuel on. So let's go ahead and just crank it over and see what we can do. I think we can get it up to oil pressure, you know, without running it. Yep, good. So that works. Coils are plugged back in. That was just the power to the coils, not from the pulse generator, so I know the timing is right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure, I got the idle turn now, but I'm going to make sure that I've got my hand on the kill switch here, and I got the key right here too, because, you know, don't know where it's set at, and starts to rev on me, it's going to get shut down immediately. So let's give her a shot. First we'll put fuel to her. Fill the carbs up, and I'm going to go ahead and turn this back off. What I want to do is just get it to pop. Not literally. Here we go. Contact! Alright, she wants to go. Idle is definitely not up too high, so let's crack it up a little bit more. Alright. A little bit more. I don't have any choke or anything, but I don't think we're going to need it. All right. Go ahead and turn the fuel back on. I'm not getting barely any vacuum at the intakes. This thing's barely coming up. That's really weird. I've never seen that. These things must be way, way off. But I don't know. So let me try one more time. Must be doing something wrong, because we got nothing. I don't know why we're not getting any. Huh. It's weird. I'm not missing something. This is how you do it. Let's go ahead and pull the caps off of there and see what they look like. I'm going to put you on the carb tune. What I did was I cracked the adjusters. I'm going to show you all this detail later, but I looked into the intake side of number one, just taking the pod off, and those things look way open. Not a whole lot left on this, not a ton left on this adjustment though, but I don't, it's almost as if it's got a ginormous vacuum leak, but I just can't see that to be the case, because everything's on there the way it's supposed to be. So everything's tightened up, and it ran pretty good with the other carbs, so it can't be anything from here forward, you know, the carbs forward. So all right, I'm gonna have to glance around at this myself, so see what we can do together. All right, I'm lost on this one. I can't get this one to bring them down enough to even get any vacuum. I'm completely lost on this one. I don't know what's going on with this. I'm gonna have to look into this further because I'm just not sure. Plus it's getting warm now, so I want to put a fan on it. I don't get it. Let me think about this a bit. All right, I'm gonna have to get back to you on this because I am completely baffled as to what's going on with this. I honestly do not know. I can back off on these adjusters, and I'm all the way out where the slides all the way down, and relative to the arm, and I can't get it to work right at all. This doesn't make any sense at all. I shouldn't have to go the other way because that would open. I don't know. I'm gonna have to fiddle with this a little bit. I'm just not understanding what's going on with this right now. So let me figure it out and we'll come back. I honestly don't know why this thing doesn't want to run right. Now, I do have a suspicion though. I happened to turn the fuel off because I always turn it off in between runs. I don't want to take any chances. I forgot to turn it back on. After it ran for a while, it actually started to run better. And then when I reopened the fuel, it started to bog and run crappy again. So I suspect that the float levels are incorrect. Now remember, I didn't do these carbs. He sent these out. So I'm going to let it cool overnight. I made sure it wasn't overheating. I've been shooting it with the laser and got the fan on it. And she's been okay. I suspect that the float level is off. I don't think it's too low. I think it's too high. That's my gut feeling. So it's kind of over fueling on the rich side, and it's bogging it down. As far as the pulses on the carb tune, I'm not 100% sure why that's doing that. In the carb tune here and all these synchronizers, there is it's right here. I'll show it to you. This is your little damper. It's a little tiny hole. It's a little piece of plastic with a very small hole going through it. And that limits the amount of vacuum impulse that comes in any one time, any one impulse. So it dampens it. I do have adjustable ones, but I can't find the fourth one. I only have 3. So I could try that on 3 carbs and see if it works. But what I'm kind of thinking about doing is I have some small brass rod. I'm thinking I'm going to turn it down tomorrow on the lathe. We'll go ahead and measure this up because I have a little pin set. I can measure the ID of this one. And then what we can do is just take it and make a series of 4 of them that are a little bit bigger. I don't think it's a problem with this being too small. Too big rather. I think it's too small for just a sharp impulse, maybe because of the valve timing. I don't know. Speaking of timing, I checked the ignition timing. It's spot on. So I think I'm going to make probably 8 of these. Go up a couple of thou on each one, and I'll decide tomorrow. Turn down the OD and just part them off and make 4 of them, and then put these in line and see if we can get a better reading, because I've never experienced that before. When you rev it up and it banks down, the vacuum comes up just fine. So I think that's because the impulses are closer together, because you're at a higher RPM. But when you ramp it up, it doesn't do that because you have the throttle open. So that would be a lower vacuum scenario. So with the RPM up and you drop the throttle down, it picks up and it's in the right spot. And again, I think it's because the impulses are so close together that I think this is too small is what I'm getting to. So I'm going to make them a little bit bigger and see what happens. Because I just really quick went direct into this with number 4, and it was shooting up like a mother. So I don't want to damage my carb tune either. So I'm going to try that tomorrow, but I got to take carbs off first. I'll do that off camera. Try to find out if something's wrong inside the settings there, the float levels and stuff. That way I can get an idea what the jetting is too. I'll read the jet numbers and then put it back together. Yeah, she's not that hot really. I didn't run it, too long any one period. I'm deathly afraid of overheating these things, especially a new motor. So I always got a fan on it after the initial start, and I always monitor the temperature. So, all right, so we'll pick it up tomorrow. All right, folks, it's a couple of days later, and I've been doing some stuff. So I put a video up repairing one of these adjuster screws, a special screw. I did the one on number 3. It works great, and no problem with it. And I had to correct some problems with the other 3. The nuts needed to be chased. It's almost as if somebody put Loctite on them. because they were kind of gummed up. So I had to chase them with an M5 tap, and I got those cleaned up so they go on nice, and bench synchronized it. Now the bench synchronization procedure can't exactly be done to the letter, because in the service manual you're supposed to put a certain thickness gauge between here, and then set the slides for 1.1 millimeter off the bottom of the bore at the front where that little notch is. But you can't reach that notch. You have a limit as far as the travel goes downwards when you screw these down to push the slide down, because this is bent. So once I realized that was bent, I kind of just guessed at what this setting should be, and then I set them all at that 1.1 with a piece of my precision pin rod, the stuff I use for measuring jets and things like that, my kit. So, I don't know if it's it's certainly not exactly right to the circus manual, but it's definitely going to get us in a ballpark where it's even. Now, as far as the sync goes, remember we had a problem with that. I have a theory on why, but I'll go into that later. I did find the fourth one of these guys, these adjustable little valves. You go in line with a synchronizer so you can adjust the amount of intake pulse that reaches your device. So that's what we're going to do. So I've cleaned the spark plugs, because I'll show you here in a B-roll clip behind my fat voice that they were really fouled, like really, really sooty. So I cleaned them all, put them back in, and got the carbs back on, as you can see. I did a jetting change, which I'll cover in a minute. I'm going to cover what was in there and what I have in here now, but I'd like to see how it runs first before we discuss that. And then I didn't do anything with the float levels. These are typical antique, ancient, from the last century, obviously, Kawasaki carburetors that don't use a measured float level. You use a service fuel level. So before I took them off camera after the last clip before this one, I did hook a clear tube up to number 4 here, since it's so accessible, and run it around the side, and then put fuel to it again, and it was dead nuts on. So I'm assuming that the company or the individual that did the carb refurbishment and rebuild probably did a service fuel level, because there is no measured float level. So we're going to have to go off of that. I didn't want to do it on all 4 because it's a mess, and this guy was supposed to do it. So when does it ever happen that we get work done outsourced and it ain't right? Okay, I don't have an answer for that either. But I do have an answer for putting you in the stand, and we'll see if we can fire it up and see how it is. All right, let's see what we got. All right, get some more idle. A little bit more. There's no enricher on, by the way. 1 and 3 are pretty good. I'm sorry, 1 and 4 are pretty good. 2 and 3 are not, so we're going to have to tweak those, but it's still behaving weirdly. Let me go ahead and prep for that, and we'll go ahead and get the adjustments made, hopefully, on the synchronizer there. Right, I'm going to let it cool a little bit now and put the fan on, and I'm going to go ahead and do some finite adjustments off camera, and then show you the final results. Obviously it runs a hell of a lot better, and then we'll discuss what I did. I'm switching over to the old school analog gauges, which is what they show in the service manual as well. And the reason why is, I don't know if you noticed it when I was fiddling with these guys and started opening them for the first time with the carb tune on, the RPMs would actually be affected, and I wouldn't know why, because I did test this not too long ago, actually the other day, because I was kind of thinking that might be the case, and this thing is not leaking. So this is a far superior tool than that, in my opinion, but I don't know why it would be affecting it. So since the service manual shows this kind of gauge set anyway, even back then, they had a manometer gauge sets. I had one, a mercury manometer vacuum synchronizer gauge set. For some reason, this one doesn't want to work right. So let's try it with this and see what the readings are. I also got my RPM gauge on because I really need to start looking at that right now. I should have been having that on all along, but now that I'm getting it closer, I definitely need to know that. Well, I got them as even as I can, since the carb tune ain't working right. I just used the carb tune on the Magna. I just used it, and it worked great. So I got these about as close as they're going to get. And now what I'm going to do is just sync them down, or tighten them down, verify that they stayed, get the caps back on, fiddle with the air screws a little bit. And then at this point, I think we'll finish this video out, and I'll tell you what I did in regards to the jetting. Like I said, I'm not going to run any more now because I'm satisfied with where it's at for the time being. I'm not completely satisfied. So let me tell you what we had first in the carbs as far as jetting, when you saw it in the earlier clips where we wouldn't run for crap. The mains were 122.5, and the slows were 25. Now that's a pretty big slow jet. For this application, even with the pods and the exhaust and so forth, and the performance mods on the motor, that's a pretty big slow jet, 25. So all I had in stock, unfortunately, was 17.5. So I put 17.5 in. They're going to need to be a little bit bigger. It's really close. I'd say maybe 20s. So that's going to be it. 22.5 maybe on the outside, but I really doubt it. I think 20s are going to be right. I think I can get those in 20s. I don't remember. I got to go look on niche cycles and go order, probably order 4 of each of them, the 120s and the 122.5s, but the 25s, way too big. And that 122.5 on the mains, obviously way too big. The way the thing was running before, just wouldn't run for crap, fouling the plugs. And we got it running a lot better. It's 100% better than it was, but it's not up to my standard for sure. So no matter what I do with the air screw, and I have it set currently at 1.5 turns out, which is pretty much within the stock parameters, we can't get it dialed in anymore. So that means right there we got to change the slow jets a little bit richer. I'll retorque the head after this heat cycle is over. Obviously it's over now. It's in the cooling mode. But once it's cooled down, like tomorrow, we'll go ahead and retorque the head again, and then just continue on other stuff. But I really needed to nail down, I needed to nail down whether or not we had some other issue going on. Now, it definitely runs a lot better. Definitely, like I said before. I guess that does it as far as the tuning goes. Okay, folks, we're a number of days in the future and did a few things. Show you what I did. First of all, I've been in communication with the engine builder, and he made some actually pretty good suggestions, which have seemed to work pretty well, which I'll show you here in a minute. The first thing I did was, if you look way in there, you can see that there is the accelerator pump linkage. And I asked the guy who did the carbs how he set it, and he really didn't give me a specific answer, so I figured he didn't. And it was frozen. When I had the carbs out, because I rejetted it, that's what I'm getting to, I unfroze that, and I reduced the stroke because it was just pumping out black smoke when you cranked it, you know, snapped the throttle. Way too much of an accelerator pump charge. I'm not 100% sure that's all dialed in 100%, but it's really close. The other thing the builder suggested me to do was to, number one, raise the needles up in the slides by 1 notch, the E-clips. And so to do these, you have to take the entire shaft out here, which I did on the bench because I was rejetting, and then take each slide out, which isn't too hard, and then clip the clip lower so it brings the needle up. I did all 4 of them, and then put all back together. And this requires a resync, which is why I've got the carb tune. Now, you saw in earlier videos that I wasn't getting hardly any reading on this, but it works now. And the reason, I'm not really sure the reason why, but what the engine builder suggested was, I told him I had put a 17.5 pilot and I got a 117.5 main. He said it's definitely going to need a 20, and I had already ordered 20, so that worked out pretty well. So I put a 20 in the slow, and I left the 117.5s in the main. I just don't see this needing any less, but I know it doesn't need any more because it's still on the rich side. So the 20 and the 117.5 seem to be working pretty well. And right now I'm in the process of resyncing it. And I am getting a pretty good reading on the Carb Tune Pro as far as vacuum. So what I'll do is I'll set you up on the stand and show you. Alright, so ignition's on. I'm just going to hit the starter. Remember, this thing's cammed up, so we're only going to get it where we're going to get it, but that's pretty damn good. I like that a lot. We've got pretty even balancing now, so I just got to snug these down, and we'll have to dial them in maybe. They may move when I snug them down, but I'll do that off camera. But all in all, it actually runs pretty well. I'm going to leave it where it's at, and the reason is, again, this project is plagued with changes. It's kind of like when you hire a contractor and then you tell the contractor you want to put in 15 different change orders to the work he's doing or she's doing, and he wants to put a set of flat slides on here now that are out with the same guy, you know, the same carb guy being polished and cleaned and rebuilt. So I'm not going to dedicate a ton of time on these, but in case he does want to leave them, I know they're going to work. So yeah, run pretty well. I can't, you know, get on the throttle too heavy. I don't like running these things on the lift like this when it's a fresh top end, because, you know, we're past our braking time, I think, right now, and as far as running time goes. But really need to put a load on it, do some steady roll on and roll off throttles and things like that. So you know, but I got to do what I got to do, you know. I mean, I got to tune it. So yeah, so that's where we're going to leave it, and I'm pretty sure we're going to leave the video there as well. But so a little persistence and a little research got me to where I needed to go. I honestly don't understand the difference between the vacuum impulse, the way it was set up before, and the way it is now regarding the needles and the jets. I don't quite understand how that would make a difference, because the vacuum impulse is going to be the vacuum impulse at a set RPM regardless of jetting and needle, because that only is controlling the fuel mixture with the air coming through. The air charge remains the same. But he said raise the needles up one, put the 20s in there, and he said you'll be able to read the vacuum better, and he was right, and I don't know why. So if you guys know why, go down in the doobly-doo down below and let me know why, because I don't quite understand that, why that is. But you know what, if it works, it works, and so far it works. So we're going to leave it, like I said, where it's at, and then leave this video where it's at. That's it on this segment or section or whatever on the tuning, getting the Z1-R back up and running, so it actually runs halfway decent. And I'm really happy in a way, the way it runs, because I'm comparing it to the way it was running before in earlier clips on this video. I mean, it barely ran, and of course that was because the jetting was so far off. Now you'd have to ask yourself why, because it was allegedly running pretty good under, you know, the other jetting, same carbs. With same jets were put back in, even by the person who restored them. I can't answer that. Changes because the engine has been built. Maybe it has higher airflow. When you have higher airflow in the intake charge with a larger jet, as I explained before, you're going to actually get a richer mixture. That's probably the case. A lot of times you have to drop your main jet down, and you're slow to a degree, to a point that you wouldn't expect that. You know, to expect a number to be that small. So the 117.5s in the mains may actually work pretty well in this scenario. So I hope you learned something. I hope you got something out of the video. I hope you're not too bored with it. I guess with that, we'll say thanks for watching and catch you on the next video.